Oh, welcome back, everybody, to the Social World Podcast. I'm Dave Niven, and as always, it's a pleasure to have your company. Now, today I'm doing another podcast that adds value and an awful lot more information to the series I'm doing on safeguarding in the Caribbean. And today I've got an excellent guest, Shamere McKenzie, who's the CEO of the Sungate Foundation, which is a survivor-led anti-trafficking organization that provides educational opportunities for survivors of human trafficking, addressing a critical gap in the human trafficking aftercare community. Now, welcome, Shamir. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited
Okay,
to be here.
good. Now, what I've seen and what I've read about you and your history is just extensive. You've been so busy and so involved in this matter. Could you just give us a little bit of a rundown about your route to here where you are now, your journey, your professional sort of journey to where you are now? And so just to introduce yourself to people.
That's a great question. So, my route to where I am today has been deeply personal and profoundly professional. As a survivor of trafficking, my lived experience became basically the foundation of my advocacy. As you know, over the years, I've moved from, lending my voice for awareness to becoming a consultant, an advisor for many organizations, government, even to the United Nations. So this is not just here in the United States, but around the world where I have helped to shape survivor-centered approaches, build strategies, influence policies, you name it, doing a lot of training. Um, at the same time, I have remained rooted in community, ensuring that, when we talk about survivors or individuals with lived experiences, ensuring that their voices are never lost in conversation or in systems that too often speak about survivors, but
Hmm.
not with survivors. Right? So
Yeah.
sometimes you see systems are organizations that, they're speaking about and survivors, but are survivors actually working with that organization?
Okay. Now, you're one of the founders or co-founders, I'm not sure, of the Caribbean Survivors Network.
Yes,
And you used to be one of the trafficking ambassadors in Jamaica, which
yes,
is your island of origin, I believe.
yes.
So, how did all that come about? I know you told me that you'd been a victim yourself, and I presumably, therefore, you got engaged with the whole process. But, I mean, essentially, did you find it difficult to go from somebody that had been through a terrible time to actually somebody that actually tried to counsel others in a similar situation?
Um, I think for me, it's my faith,
Mhm.
is one of the driving factors in doing this work, right? And when you've had such a traumatic experience as being trafficked, and you go through that process of healing, and if you are really tapped into your humanity, you cannot help yourself or avoiding getting back into this work to help someone else at any capacity,
Mm.
right? It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
for me, that's where my heart is how can I serve? And I've done a lot of things over the years, and I think my heart of service for humanity is what led me to do many of these things, because I'm always thinking of different ways how I can help, how I can serve, whether that's victims, helping them rebuild their lives, whether that's organization in terms of organizational development, whether that is training in terms of training various professionals on how to identify and respond to trafficking. And so I believe that my faith is deeply rooted in this path that I have taken. And as you begin to do this, and you see, there are various problems. And I'm the type of person, when I see a problem, I don't just like talking about the problem. I'm very solution oriented, right?
Hmm.
So for me, when I see the problem, I first ask myself, what can I do about the problem? Because oftentimes we see issues, right? And we point our fingers to say, oh, this is the government's problem. This is law enforcement's problem. This is this person's problem. But we never ask ourselves this and say, this is my problem and what can I do about it?
Very
Right?
good philosophy, but it does take a lot of strength, doesn't it?
It does. But in doing this work, the strength lies in collaboration. Right? So, yes, I may be a visionary and I may be solution oriented, but how can I collaborate with other entities, with other individuals to bring that vision to life?
Okay. Let's take a couple of steps back, if I could. Um,
Sure.
the Caribbean or the
Hmm.
Caribbean. I'm never sure who prefers which pronunciation, but generally that region of the world that you grew up in and that
Hmm.
you have been involved with for quite some time, even though you live in Maryland now. Um, what would you say was the scale of the problem in the Caribbean at the moment? Excuse me, folks listening, you might hear some thunder in the background. I'm afraid the heavens are joining us on this podcast. Anyway, sorry, Shamir. What would you say the scale of the problem was?
So when we look at human trafficking in the Caribbean, right? One, the scale of the problem, it varies, right? But one of the major issues, one, is for individuals to recognize that human trafficking is happening
Mm,
um,
mm,
in the Caribbean,
mm.
right?
Hmm.
And what it actually looks like, right? So, human trafficking, um, it's a crime that people confuse with other types of crime, right? And
Yeah,
so one is getting people to understand what human trafficking is, what it looks like in their community, right?
yeah,
And so it's not what you see on TV, right? Let's look at so for example, there are many documentaries or many movies that have come out about trafficking, but for mainly what we see in terms of trafficking in the Caribbean, it's families. Like people are trafficked through families or, in search of a better opportunity, right? So I'm moving from a rural area, right, to a city, and I'm just saying,
yeah,
hey, I got this opportunity and I'm looking for a better opportunity. Or maybe it's moving from my country, seeking to go to another country, and I end up being trafficked, right?
yeah.
So that is really one of the issues that I see. Um, Not understanding in terms of from the victim-centered approach that, you know, I see a lot of victim blaming, and this is not just in the Caribbean, but this is across the world, where people blame victims for their circumstances, not understanding that that's not how someone started out.
If
Someone
you
didn't
take
raise
it
their
that
hand,
if you take
right?
people that have been affected by scams and who are seduced by the opportunity of a better life, that is a worldwide problem. I do appreciate that.
Right. And really getting people to understand that, right? Like someone didn't say, "Hey, I want to be trafficked," right? Someone was looking for a better opportunity.
Mm,
And through false promises, through fraud, someone ended up being trafficked,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
sometimes people create a narrative for victims that they have no idea about.
Okay. Are we talking hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands? I mean, I could make a guess as somebody that's slightly detached from this, but you've lived a situation there in the region, both as you said, somebody that was affected by it, but also somebody that now is an educator in to do with it. What's your sort of sense of the scale of the problem in terms of numbers?
Well, when we talk about numbers on trafficking, we have to understand that this is an underground issue.
Mm-hmm.
And unless victims are identified, right,
Mm-hmm.
we're not able to get accurate numbers. And identification in and of itself is problematic, right? Victims are often not trusting, um, agencies that are in place to protect them. And that's also because of the narrative that's put forth from the individuals who are trafficking them, right?
Yeah.
Or experiences they've had with various agencies. But what we do know is that it's happening and one life is too much.
Okay. Now, I asked the question because I know that you're what's called a subject matter expert on
Hmm.
trafficking, and I know that you've trained a whole variety of professionals in some of the top agencies that are involved with this, like the FBI, Homeland Security, Bureau
Hmm.
of Diplomatic Security, etc., apart from all other individual organizations. So when you talk to them about the actual kind of identification and response of victims, I mean, what sort of evidence or what sort of discussion can you have with them about that? What would you like them to be aware of that you don't think people really are much aware of at the moment?
Not just that it exists, but how to interact with
Okay.
a victim of trafficking,
Okay.
that trauma-informed approach, that survivor-centered approach on, just keys to interaction basically, because sometimes we think like, well, that's a simple answer. I know how to interact with someone who have gone through trauma. That's easy, right?
Mm.
But we bring our we bring different biases, right? We see things through different lens. We can all look at a picture and see something different, but it's really getting that training and education and awareness about what this issue is so that we can better respond. How trauma impacts the brain. Understanding that when trauma impacts the brain, it may impact on how you view yourself, how you view others, how you view the world. Understanding that these individuals who have been trafficked, like someone broke their trust. I trusted someone, right? And
Yep.
then I was trafficked. So it's really hard for me after having that experience to now come out and try to trust someone else,
It's
right?
not just trust. I suspect, tell me if I'm wrong, but I suspect there's also a huge amount of fear still, even when somebody has been interrupted at being trafficked and kind of rescued is a sort of an emotive word, but stopped. The trafficking has been stopped, but I imagine still the fear carries on.
Yes. The fear when we talk about, which is why when we understand that human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal activity globally, um
Mm,
we're talking about human beings who are at the center. We're talking about humans we're already complex individuals, right? So going through trafficking doesn't make you complex, right? As human beings, we're complex people. But when you add trauma to that,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Now, that's a whole other can of worms, right? When you add lack of opportunity, right? So it was my desire for a better life that led me to be trafficked. That's very compound.
Do you find that words like shame and embarrassment come into it as well? When people realize that they've been fooled, they've been duped, they've been seduced wrongly, and the families back home or whoever, have expectations of them, and they don't know how to ask them for help anymore.
So when we talk about someone who's been impacted by trafficking, there's several types of harm that's done,
Hmm.
right? So it's
Hmm.
the physical harm, financial harm, and
Yeah,
then reputational harm,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
the reputational harm is where sometimes as a society, it's really hard for us to understand because sometimes we're talking about cultural being sensitive to various cultures that cause that. So when we talk about fear, shame, guilt, those cultural sensitivity pieces, we have to consider that. So let's take, for example, if I'm from a culture that prides itself in, hey, you must be a virgin on your wedding day, and you end up being trafficked for sex, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm dealing with not just the shame and guilt, but how can I return to my community?
Yeah. Yeah.
What would my community say? Right? Now, that's just one example. As individuals, and I'm speaking in the aggregate here, as individuals, we have our own preconceived notions or we have our own thoughts around certain topics, such as prostitution in the community, right? People feel like, well, individuals who are engaged in prostitution, that's their choice. They want to be there. And oftentimes they don't stop to think how many times a person was beaten before they see them somewhere smiling
Yeah.
and that these individuals may not want to be there. And I really want to pause for a second and state that not every individual that engages in prostitution um, is being trafficked. Some individuals, it's a choice, right? But I do want to talk about how, as a society, we have prevented individuals from coming forward, right? How we don't try to support. We ask questions such as, what happened to you? Versus, how can I help you? How can I support you to move forward?
I think hey, listen, I'm with you all the way because I've talked to other organizations, other people, and I've got a sense of the situation, nothing like as deep as you have, but effectively that once the tens of thousands of people across the world that are trafficked, that have been trafficked, are absolutely kind of deconstructed mentally, physically, emotionally, socially, whatever. There's so many different aspects to their harm. I
Hmm.
totally get it. And yes, okay, so there's people that choose to be prostitutes. That I understand that, but that doesn't take away from the fact that there's tens of thousands of people that would give anything not to be in the situation that they're in, and not to be the victims of what, after all, I suspect you would agree is organized crime.
It is organized crime, definitely, because when we look at human trafficking, right, we also have to understand that sex trafficking is only one type of trafficking. The
Hmm.
most common form of trafficking is labor trafficking, right? Where we're all beneficiaries of labor trafficking in some way, shape, or form.
I didn't mention the slavery word, um, really, because obviously I've got issues in terms of distinction between slavery and trafficking, but I'm picking up from you that in many cases it's exactly the same thing.
So
Is that fair?
when we look, yeah, yes, right? But I do want to honor. And I do want to hold space to understand, for individuals to understand that when we are talking about trafficking, it is in fact modern day slavery, and we're not taking away from the experiences of the individuals that were a part of chattel slavery. We're
No.
not taking away from that. But when you understand where someone was taken, right, they were given a new name,
Hmm.
they couldn't embrace the name that they have. They were forced to work for long hours,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Without the proper pay,
Yeah.
right? When you didn't have the ability to leave a plantation, it's similar. So we see a lot of similarities to chattel slavery, but we also have some differences. So when you look at those similarity of you're given another name, you're forced to work long hours with little or no pay, your inability to leave, right? The breakdown of your safety net. And I could go on and on with several different examples. We see the similarities there.
No, I do understand. And I think that the whole aspect, if you put them all in a box together, the issue of domestic slavery, the issue of forced labor, the issue of coercion and control, the issue of
Hmm.
sex trafficking, the issue of children I've talked about in the Pacific Rim who have to gather in the whole prawn harvest and then are killed afterwards. You know, the idea of follow the money, which is another thing that we apparently organizations in America are training frontline financial staff to spot signs of people being trafficked through financial kind of transactions and so forth. It's such an insidious, huge issue that I mean, I admire so much people like yourself who are desperately trying to do all you possibly can to counter it, but it must be a massive job.
It is a massive job, but what when you look at the issue is complex, right? And the important thing to recognize is that I don't have all the solution,
Hmm.
right? But
Yeah,
I do have a role to play.
yeah. Well, look,
And I can,
can I just interrupt you a second? I just want
yeah,
people to realize that you're also a survivor advocacy consultant since last year, I believe, in to do with the UN. You're also an internationally recognized speaker and trainer.
yes,
You're also somebody that it was the co-chair of the Victim Services Committee of the Maryland State Human Trafficking Task Force.
yes.
This anti-human trafficking ambassador for Jamaica that you were, the lived experience that you've also had yourself. My
Mhm.
goodness, I mean, you must have a terrific capacity to actually absorb and deal with all of that.
When we talk about capacity, I don't think I have enough time in the day to really do the things that I want to do.
Well, I was
And
going to ask you about what you do in the afternoons.
but it's something that I'm very passionate about. I'm passionate about how the impact that I can have on someone else's life,
Yeah.
right? And so the things that I do, the things that I associate, the organizations that I associate with it, the greater picture for that is the legacy that I can leave in this world.
Yeah.
Contribution, when I look at this issue that we know that is a problem, how can I contribute to the solution? What skills, gifts, and talents do I have, right, that I can give back to this very issue to make a difference in the life of someone else? And we
Okay.
all have skills, gifts, and talents, right? You're using yours right now to have a podcast with me on here, right? What other skills, gifts, and talents do some of our viewers have that they can lend to this issue?
All right. I take the point very strongly. Now, look, other things I want to ask, for example, you've got your magic wand in your hand there, right? Okay.
Yes, I have a
Resource,
magic wand.
yes, resources. I've got to talk about the Caribbean, because that's where we're trying to focus at the moment, and that's where your expertise stems from. I mean, but what's missing? What resources would really help kind of advance the fight, if you like, put it that way?
So to truly move that needle, right?
Hmm.
Resources must, and I'm going to say must be directed towards long-term survivor support. What
Okay.
do I mean by long-term survivor support? That's housing, right? So
Hmm.
survivors sometimes don't have a place to stay. Mental health. I can't stress mental health enough
Hmm.
because when your brain has been impacted by trauma, you need to unpack that trauma to move forward, right?
Yeah.
Education, long-term support in terms of education, in terms of job training, right? Not just a short-term crisis response. And the short-term crisis response is important, but we need long-term survivor support. We need specialized trauma-informed services, right? Trauma informed is the key there. Trauma informed services, not just any services, but services that understand the behaviors and mannerisms that survivors are going to exhibit and how we respond to those behaviors and mannerism. Um, Another thing that I think that we need in terms of resources is understanding that collaboration is the key. Many people like to operate in silos that, oh, I'm doing this, but we have to learn how to collaborate across sector, right? And so that collaboration should be between law enforcement and civil society, right? With healthcare, with all sectors, right? And then some capacity building for various professionals, right? Who are the first responders? When in the individuals who are identified as first responders, right? How can they identify and respond to victims without re-traumatizing them?
Yeah. I do get it. And to be honest with you, you're singing the song that I like because effectively, all my working life, the movement has been towards multi-agency working together, not, as you said, in silos, not just
Mhm.
one profession trying to do the whole thing. And it sounds very much the same in terms of the outline that you've just spoken about for the future. The idea that people working in multi-agency teams and working
Mhm.
together with all their different disciplines and all their different expertise being pooled for the benefit of survivors. I mean, that does make such sense. The only question for me, though, is that there are a lot of roadblocks in the way, and I do believe that, for example, a recent one, the withdrawal of U.S. Aid, for example, in the Caribbean, has really probably made an impact to some of the work that was going on. Is that something that came across your desk?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Hmm.
Careful what I'm saying in
Well,
response to the
say
question.
whatever you like, but
But
you won't say anything terrible, I suspect.
I, I won't, but I do want to say that we are talking about people's lives,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And as we continue with any issue, we cannot allow ego, power, greed, amongst many other things that I can call out to get in the way of service.
Yeah.
And we need to understand how power, greed, and ego can impact the lives of others.
Or just selfishness, in terms of some people who've got the levers of control, if you like. And I think my guess is you're probably going to have to wait another year or two to sort of get the thing leveled out again, perhaps. But
A year or two is very ambitious, Dave.
let's be ambitious. Come on, let's.
It's very ambitious, because I'm dealing with survivors right now
Yeah.
who, I remember one of the issues that I faced and I struggled with for about 2 months until I had to really take this back to God was when funding was cut for some survivors that I was working with, and all they needed, the only thing that they needed to get safety, immediate safety. And when I say the only thing, I'm talking about for their immediate safety. I'm not talking about the long term because we
Yeah.
know that they needed long term services.
Mhm.
But what they needed in that moment for their immediate safety was 150 US dollars, which could not be provided because those funds were taken away.
Yeah. It has. I've talked to other people in similar lines of work and impacted in this way as well. And I mean, the first person who I'm putting a podcast out on this matter, Amanda, it was part of the UN development program who got totally had the carpet taken from under their feet totally financially, and she's now left that and is trying to sort of rebuild herself on her own. And it sounds there's so many similar stories across the region.
But
Um,
Dave, to just piggyback on what you're saying, when you look at the professionals who have been impacted, that's one thing. Because as professionals, we can go get other jobs, we can, lend, reshape in terms of our skill set, go in other industries. But the people who are at the heart of our work, right? The help that they need,
yeah,
there are no other resources for them. They can't bounce back. So for me, it's like it's a matter of life and death.
yeah. I get it. I do understand, and it's a shocking state of affairs that we live in a world where, as you said, greed and power are totally undermining the basic traumatic needs of lots of human beings. But I mean, I suppose that's been the case right since the beginning of time, that there are groups in society that take advantage and totally live off the pain and the suffering of some of the other people that they live with.
Hmm.
Okay, right. Now, in terms of current work, the Caribbean Survivors Network, could you just say a little bit about that?
Oh my stars, I'm so excited about the Caribbean Survivor Network. This was a project that I was pregnant with for several years, right? The my first international speaking engagement was in 2011. 2011, I'm not going to say the island that I went to because I want to protect this individual whose
Okay.
story I'm about to share. But in 2011, my first international speaking engagement, I went to a particular island. I was, on the radio, on the television, in the newspaper, and the reporter was so captivated by my story. He went home and he spoke to his wife. And he says, "Oh my gosh, there's this girl here from America. I've never heard a story like this ever, and I have to cover this story." And he was going through the motions, right?
Mm,
And his wife said to him, "Oh my gosh, I have to meet her."
okay.
Well, I met his wife only to find out his wife was also a victim of trafficking.
Wow. Wow.
Now, the story gets deeper because his wife wanted me not to tell him that she was a victim of trafficking.
I
Now, I'm
see.
not I'm not a mental health provider.
Right.
So, and I would be muddying the waters in terms of mental health, in terms of their marital affairs. There are so many things, reasons why, that's just
Yeah.
not my place. What I also found is that because this island was so small, that survivor wasn't trusting of any professional for help. The fear of, her story coming out about the shame, guilt and shame, not just for her, but also for her family, right?
Yeah.
She was fearful of that. And so she really leaned on me to help her through the process. But I do a very good job of staying in my lane and understanding my own capabilities, skills, gifts, and talents. And so as I was traveling to different islands, I realized as I was connected with survivors, this became a repeated
Right.
thing where
Yeah.
survivors would connect to me and they wouldn't trust others. And I'm just like, I am not the end all be all. We have to come up with a way where these survivors can get supported without just leaning on Shamere. And so, I had the thought and I'm thinking, well, how am I going to do this if, I'm based here in the US? That would require a lot of resources. And then, the one of the beauty of the pandemic is that it helped us to recognize how we could be connected without being in the same place physically,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
right? And so through that, it was in May of 2024 where, I was in Jamaica and I was hearing these stories of things happen, again, surrounded by survivors, hearing their needs. And one survivor said to me, "Shamir, well, you've had this idea. It's time for you to do something about it." And, all the things that I thought about in, well, I need to implement this and I need to talk to this person and I need to do this. The Holy Spirit just said to me, like, just start it.
Okay. Let me ask you a
Just start
question.
it and the
Right.
help will come.
Let me ask you a quick question that's occurred to me, but I'm sure uh, if there is a kind of a Caribbean survivors network, which is what you
Mhm,
just discussed starting, but at the same time, there's lots of people that you described not wanting to let people close to them or anybody else around them know that they're a survivor.
mhm.
How do they access resources? How do they access help without, as it were, sort of putting their head above the parapet?
So, one of the things that I have seen, I've been doing this work for 15 years. Survivors connect with survivors.
Hmm.
Survivors feel more comfortable sharing when they understand that, hey, you have had that same similar experience that I've had. So informing the network, right? It's the first layer or the first foundation is getting connected with others like yourself. through that, you empower individuals to get. So if I'm going through something, David, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I feel crazy. I'm dealing with, shame and guilt. And
Yeah.
I come on to a call with other survivors and I share, like, guys, I'm really thinking about this, but I think that I'm crazy for thinking. And 5 to 6 other people said, no, I have the same thought, right? Now, that lets me feel a little bit more at ease to say, I'm not crazy. Sounds a little bit more normal.
Yeah.
Like my thinking is normal. Others are sharing it, so I'm not crazy, right? And then when you have other individuals that will empower you to say, hey, you can move forward from this. I have experienced that, and here are some tools that I use to move forward. That's a step in the right direction.
Well, hearing other people who've had similar terrible experiences to yourself in all forms of life, that it does help. I know that,
Hmm.
it would be something, but I'm just saying, thinking back of your story there of a very small island and a very small community, not wanting people to know, and yet there is something out there now called the Caribbean Survivors Network. I
Hmm.
mean, can they just access it, for example, some people to start with before they can get the empowerment that online?
So we haven't made it public as yet.
Right. Okay.
So what I did first, because I didn't want this to be a Shamere McKenzie thing,
Hmm.
what I did was I gathered survivors who could basically lay that foundation of what the network looked like and what we could provide to survivors who are coming in.
Hmm.
And that took several months for us to really lay that foundation. As I said, we're not even a year old,
Yeah.
right? So this
Yeah.
is something that's brand new because I wanted survivors to really shape what this network looked like. I didn't want it to be, oh, Shamir had this idea because survivors, we're not a monolithic group, right? So I
Yeah.
wanted
Yeah.
different voices. I wanted different experiences. I want people to say, hey, I want this that's specific to me. Because even when we look at survivors, right, no two survivors carry the same trauma. Right? We have children, we have adults, we have labor trafficking, we have sex trafficking. Some of the scars are visible. We have invisible wounds. Healing isn't linear, right? And so when you bring together a group of survivors, that's going to lay that foundation so that when someone comes in, we can say, this is who we are, this is what we do. And as we're
Totally. Yes.
and as we're inviting other survivors, they too get to shape what the network means, right? But for me, the first step was laying that foundation, bringing survivors together and laying that foundation.
It's a difficult piece. I get it. A very difficult piece of what I would call kind of therapeutic choreography.
Hmm.
Because I'm sure you would agree with me, and this has been my experience and work over decades now. There, there's no such thing as a generic survivor.
Hmm.
There's no absolute template that sort of says, oh yeah, that'll do everybody. Well, because it can't. It's ridiculous. Because as you were pointing out, they're all different human beings with different ways to deal with trauma. So
Right.
it's such a difficult thing. It's not like you're saying, people that do knitting or people that do crochet, they can all come together because we're just talking about one particular kind of need, one particular skill or something like
Hmm.
that. What you're talking about is people that have experienced a whole range of traumatic episodes, and
Hmm.
and their own background will determine what strength or what weakness they have got in dealing with it. It's a very, very difficult. I'm really just essentially agreeing with you how difficult it must be.
It is absolutely difficult. It's challenging, but the beauty is operating in community.
Hmm. Okay.
Is operating in community versus, even I've also started like the Maryland Survivor Network, right? And I've been a part of other survivor networks. Um, and it's the beauty is just knowing that you have community, knowing that you're not alone in your situation, that you have a safe space to, express your thoughts, have individuals who understand, right? And
Yeah.
that's crucial, right? Who's non-judgmental, right? And really understand your experience versus someone who's not. who haven't experienced this level of trauma that you are. And not only are you feeling this hurt and pain that I need comfort, I may need comfort it at a given time, but now I have to also do the due diligence to educate you.
Yes.
That can be difficult. That
Yeah,
trying
it
to
is.
educate someone about my hurt when what I need in that time is comfort, is, empathy.
Yeah, just the feeling of totally being safe.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, look, we're coming to the last few minutes, I'm afraid, and I want to make sure that over the next year or
You
so.
went out there, David.
Sorry? Oh,
You're going in and out.
okay. Hang on a second. So, okay, what messages would you like to give people who are listening to this that are either on the supportive side or on the victim side, if you like, in terms of how to access support or how to offer yourselves to support?
Can you repeat that question again?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if you had any particular advice for people listening who either were going through experiences right now and they really wanted a way to try and break free, or alternatively, who were professionals who wanted to start offering their help in supporting all these tens of thousands of people in their communities, because this will go, people all over the world will listen to this. So it's not just the Caribbean, but I'm focusing on that because it's a very specific area and something I've always been fascinated about learning. So, I mean, just some words of advice from you, Shamir, if you could.
So, to individuals who I would say are maybe practitioners,
Mm,
I would say slow down. Relationship matters, right? Healing doesn't happen on a timeline, right? Sometimes I feel like people think that, oh, in 6 months, a survivor should be here, right? So healing doesn't happen on a timeline. Um, we have to center trust, dignity, and choice because those things will determine the outcome more than any protocol, right? Sometimes individuals operate on you know, this internal protocol, organizational protocol. And I will say sometimes we have to do away with that and be more relational. To advocates who I would say who are doing this work, I want to say be loud in your advocacy, but also be strategic. Right? Let your
mm.
passion be guided by those closest to the pain, because those closest to the pain are also closest to the solution. And I heard that somewhere, and I should really dig up where I heard that from, but that's not a Shamere McKenzie's quote. That's someone else's quote, and I want to repeat that
Who cares? It's a good quote.
because those who are closest to the pain are often those who are closest to the solution,
Yeah.
right? Um, we have to learn how to work with survivors, to build with them, right? We must center humanity around bureaucracy, relationships over, policy, right? We
Mm.
need to stop building programs that's designed to save people, right? Because I can't tell you how much I hear, oh, we're trying to save survivors. Right? But we need to start building programs or systems that no longer exploit survivors or fail survivors. To a survivor out there that may be listening and haven't really gotten services or questioning whether that you are a survivor, what I want to say to you in particularly is that you matter. You are important. You are enough. You have a right to be loved, to be cared for. There are people out here who want to help you, who want to love on you, who really want to walk alongside you and support you on this journey of healing. There are services available to you. And you can move beyond your experiences. You are not your story. You are not what happened to you. You have far more gifts and talents, far more things that define who you are than your lived experience.
Okay. And apart from the depth of humanity that needs to be brought to bear on this matter, I, I probably am true in saying too that money wouldn't be turned away. In terms of there probably needs to be quite a lot of funding to support several of the processes and programs that we've discussed. I mean, is there anywhere that you would like people to kind of contribute
Donate?
to,
Yes.
donate?
So there is the Sungate Foundation, and that website is sun dash or hyphen gate.org. Um, At Sungate, we provide educational opportunities to survivors. And education is very important because it prevents re-trafficking, right? Education is an avenue of hope. When we talk about ways to prevent someone from going back to their trafficker, there's a saying that says, if you give a man a fish, he eats once, right? But if you teach a man how to fish, he eats for a lifetime. And that's what we could do with education. So I encourage individuals to fund, donate to Sungate. And I also want to speak to that individual out there that may be listening that wants to help us with funding the Caribbean Survivor Network. We are new, but there are several pieces that we would like funding for, such as our website. We don't have a website because that requires funding,
Yeah.
right? So if you have
Chicken and egg, yeah.
resources that can help, you can email me.
Oh,
That's just my email is simple, shamere.mckenzie@gmail.com.
well, don't worry, Shamir. Hang on. Because I'm going to say something that hopefully will answer that.
Mhm.
Each podcast has a front page with a lot of text about, in this case, it'll be about you, it'll be about what we're talking about. But I also want to publish any link, any email addresses, any kind of place to send things to, anything like that, any events coming up, whatever. You just give them to me and I'll put them on the front page. And so people listening, knowing that they don't have to run away and grab a pen or a pencil or scribble away or type desperately, it'll all be there on the front page if you'll send them to me.
Sure, I will.
Okay. Well, look, Shamere McKenzie, a very impressive woman and a very impressive guest, and thank you ever so much for your time. I hope, as I said, I'd like to come back to you again and see how it's going in a year or so, if you'll have us. And from the Social World podcast, just thank you very much indeed for taking part.
Thank you so much, David. I'm truly honored to be able to be here with you, to share in this capacity. A part of me feel like we need to have a part two to dig in to some of the
Oh,
weeds,
maybe a
but
part three too. Who knows? Who knows, eh? All right, listen,
but
Shamir, thank you ever so much for your time. I'm just going to stop now, but thank you.